everyone. It's about 7:32 on Thursday, October 15th. And this is the Wilmette Park District regular meeting of the Board of Park Commissioners. Somebody might need to mute their phone. Before we start, I'd just like to comment, for those of you who have a packet available, the calendar of events for October and November is very impressive, especially given that every single one of those events has had to have some change done to it for the current COVID situation. Some of the events are virtual, some of them are in person, but they've all been adjusted, and I give the staff a lot of credit for being able to pull all that together. So let's head on to the agendas. Could we do a roll call of those in attendance, please, Steve?
Sure. Commissioner Abbott?
Here.
Commissioner Murdoch?
Here.
Commissioner Schisler?
Here.
Commissioner Clark?
Here.
Commissioner Wolf?
Here.
Commissioner Goebel?
Here.
Mute.
And Commissioner Anderson?
Here.
You have a quorum.
All right, the next item on the agenda is the approval of the minutes. We've got 6 sets of minutes. And could somebody start us off with a motion to approve the January 29th Committee of the Whole meeting minutes?
I move to approve the January 29th, 2020 Committee of the Whole meeting minutes.
Second.
I second.
All right. Any questions, comments, edits beyond what's already been done? All right, Steve, I'll take that as a signal we need to take a roll call vote.
Sure. Commissioner Abbott?
Yes.
Commissioner Murdoch?
Yes.
Commissioner Schisler?
Yes.
Commissioner Clark?
Yes.
Commissioner Wolf?
Yes.
Commissioner Goebel?
Yes.
Commissioner Anderson?
Yes,
Minutes are approved.
thank you. Next item are the May 11th, 2020 annual meeting minutes. Could I get a motion and a second on that?
Make such a motion.
I'll second.
Thank you. Any questions, comments, edits, or other improvements beyond what's already been done? Hearing none, did we have a roll call vote?
Commissioner Abbott?
Yes.
Commissioner Murdoch?
Yes.
Commissioner Schisler?
Yes.
Commissioner Clark?
Yes.
Commissioner Wolf?
Yes.
Commissioner Goebel?
Yes.
Commissioner Anderson?
Yes.
Minutes are approved.
Okay, moving right along here. We've got the June 8th, 2020 regular meeting minutes. Could I have a motion to approve and a second, please?
I'll move to approve the
Second.
June 8th. Yes.
Thanks, Cecilia. Second was Todd, I think.
Yep.
Any questions, comments, edits?
I think we may have skipped the May 27th minutes.
Okay, on the agenda,
Actually, I'm going to ask Libby to hop in here. I know she sent an email on this topic, and let her explain to us.
oh, I haven't
Yeah.
seen that. Okay.
Yes.
All right.
So the agenda lists July 13 minutes, but the packet includes the cow minutes from May. So the July meeting minutes aren't there to be approved, so that's tabled. And because the May 27th Committee of the Whole meeting minutes are not on the agenda, they need to be tabled.
Okay.
So we'll skip from June 8th to August 10th.
But within the packet, that's what Commissioner Goebel was pointing out, is that May 27th was in the packet. So
Right.
before we got to June 8th. So we're not going to vote on that because it's not on the agenda. You can't vote for something that's not on the agenda. And then since we mislabeled something, we got to wait on those as well. So the June 8th ones where we've had the motion and the second are in the packet, are on the agenda, and we can take that vote.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions, comments, or edits, please? Hearing none, could we have a roll call vote?
Commissioner Abbott,
Yes.
Commissioner Murdoch,
Yes.
Commissioner Schisler,
Yes.
Commissioner Clark,
Yes.
Commissioner Wolf,
Yes.
Commissioner Goebel,
Yes.
Commissioner Anderson.
Yes.
Minutes are approved. So now we are skipping to the August 10th minutes.
Correct. All right. Could I get a motion and a second for the August 10th, 2020 regular meeting minutes?
I'll move to approve the August 10th meeting minutes.
I'll second.
All right. Any discussion, questions, edits, comments? Hearing none, could we get a roll call vote, please?
Commissioner Abbott,
Yes.
Commissioner Murdoch,
Yes.
Commissioner Schisler,
Yes.
Commissioner Clark,
Yes.
Commissioner Wolf,
Yes.
Commissioner Goebel,
Yes.
Commissioner Anderson.
Yes.
Minutes are approved.
Okay, the last set of minutes to approve are the September 14th regular meeting minutes. I know there were a couple changes that were fairly minor. I did see that. I'm not sure how I missed the rest of the email. Could I get a motion and a second?
I'll make a motion to approve the September 14th regular meeting minutes.
Second.
Okay, any further edits, questions, comments? Hearing none, could we get a roll call vote, please?
Yes.
Commissioner Murdoch,
Yes.
Commissioner Schisler,
Yes.
Commissioner Clark,
Yes.
Commissioner Wolf,
Yes.
Commissioner Goebel,
Yes.
Commissioner Anderson.
Yes.
Minutes are approved.
All righty. Next item on the agenda is the communications and correspondence. We did have a couple emails in the packet. One was a letter to all the commissioners and the staff from the group called Wilmette Park Friends. I think most, if not all of them, are residents backing onto community playfields. There was sort of a recitation of facts that have happened so far to date with the Community Playfields project. And there was a fairly comprehensive list of requested actions that we take that were included as well. In addition, we got a note from Mary Shea. She and some friends would like to donate a white oak tree, which I did not know was the state tree, in memory of Charlie Shea, who recently passed away. And put it in Bateman Park, which is at the very kind of southwest corner of Gilson. And, also asked that we kind of go after a tree program and a landscape plan for the lakefront. Those were the two pieces of written communication that were in the packet. Anybody else have something that they might have received?
You know, we received an email like right before this board meeting. I just couldn't mention that. It's kind of, honestly, I just saw it and I'm not even sure who it was from. So, but
Yeah,
we
I
did.
believe the email was from Kathy Hargrave, and it came in within the last 30 minutes for sure.
Yeah.
Okay, will that go in the next packet then, Steve?
Yes.
Okay, great. Okay, well, this would then be the public comment and the recognition of visitors.
Should the lakefront meeting take up Mary Shea's email? I'm assuming you'll ship that over to that committee.
Yeah, that would be my recommendation, is that we refer that to the Lakefront Committee meeting, considering we've had kind of extensive conversations about memorial plantings in and around Gilson. So I do believe it warrants some conversation at a committee level.
Sure. My condolences to the Shea family.
Absolutely.
Okay, public comment portion. We have a few people lined up, Steve, I think, based on what you were telling us before.
Yep.
If everybody can remember, this is 3 minutes, your opportunity to give us your input and comments. And you can ask questions. There won't be necessarily any answers, but it is a way of getting things out in front of us as we then ponder later on in the meeting. So, Steve, you want to?
Sure.
Go.
I'll take it from here. I'm just going to say the name that's in the corner of your screen, and If you could unmute yourself and let us know if you have comments, please start with your name and address and then give us your comments. If you don't have anything to say, you can just indicate that you're here to listen. At about 3 minutes, I'll try and find a moment where you're taking a breath to let you know we've hit the 3 minutes and ask you to start wrapping up. So the first name I see on the screen is Kent Newscable.
Yes, my name is Kent Newscable. I live at 2530 Laurel Lane. I spoke recently at the committee relative to Parks and Rec about the projects at Community Playfield. I don't have a lot to say tonight. I just want to listen mostly, but I do have some concerns about how the projects that may be planned will move forward from here, given how the irrigation was kind of started and or halfway done at this point. So I'd like to know about the process more and understand how the decisions will be made. Thank you.
Thank you, Kent. Next on the screen, I see Walter Keats.
Sorry. Hi. Yeah, we sent the one email. We've got some more emails that'll be coming with some more analysis of stuff like the hard surface path that would be nice not to do. And the restroom, it appears that you guys are going to do that regardless of what we all want to do. So we certainly want to vote for location B as the first choice and location A as a second choice, if it has to be there. So those are the two things at this point.
Thank you, Mr. Keats. Next on the screen, I see Alan Golden.
Yes, Alan Golden, 2516 Laurel Lane. I'm on the south side of the community playfield. I also spoke at the Parks and Rec Committee meeting the other night. I just have a few questions that I think we need answers. So this also has to do with the running track and the potential of lights. I'd like to know who's going to run in the park at night. Certainly the people who live around the park, the most likely people to use the park at night, were in pretty much 100% opposition to having the track with lights. So I'm just like to know who people think are going to run in the park at night. You know, also, as Walter sent out some information, there's 166 miles of lit sidewalk in the village. So I don't think we've got a shortage of hard surface lit places for people to run or jog. So I guess, why are we paving over green space with more concrete when we don't really need it, because people can jog on the street? I have a street light right outside my house. If I want to go take a walk around the block or go for a jog, I just walk out my front door. People on the east side of the village are not going to drive to Community Playfield to jog in a circle at night. That's just preposterous. So again, and just to remember that when we had the committee meeting the other night, while Walter mentioned again that the bathroom situation is, you know, about 50% of the people look like they wanted the bathroom. The question sort of where the placement should be. Nobody wanted the path or the lights. So just please keep that in mind as you continue deliberation. That's it. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Golden. Next on the screen, I see Neil Ferrari.
Okay, I think I'm up. My name is Neil Ferrari. I live at 2546 Laurel Lane, 39-year resident of Wilmette. I have three brief comments. The first one has to do with a suggestion made by, I think, Walter some time ago. It's unfortunate that there does not appear any interest by the board to develop a master plan for the community playfield prior to implementing any improvements. The neighbors have suggested this as a good first step. And I think before any improvements are done, a landscape plan has been discussed. The landscape plan should be part of a total plan for the community playfield. Second comment, I think it'd be a very good idea for the park district to clearly express its priorities for all improvements for all three parks. The amount of money you have available through the IGA is limited. And it would seem to me that some listing of all of the projects that you wish to undertake for all the parks should be listed. I assume irrigation systems for all 3 parks are probably the highest. Bathrooms, if that's necessary. The IGA funding will only go so far. It seems that you do not want to spend your money all in one place and then get caught short on the last park. So lastly, it's obvious that a restroom facility is going to go into the community playfield despite neighborhood objections. That said, if the proposed sites are evaluated objectively based on centralized locations to the ball diamonds, the soccer fields and the tennis courts, the ease of access for maintenance, the ease of access to existing utilities, the ability to provide police security, and minimal visual impact to the playfield's open spaces, option B clearly comes closest to meeting these criteria. As a side note, besides my prepared remarks here, I was somewhat aghast to see the size of the buildings that were shown from other parks. I cannot imagine such a large monstrosity in community playfield. But you'd be surprised how many local citizens want to work with the park district, but nobody's asking. That's my comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ferrari. Next on the screen, I see Carol Rogalski.
Yes, I live at 2533 Marion Lane on the north side of the park. And I'll just briefly repeat what I said at the last committee meeting. I have concerns to adding more impervious surface to the green space at Community Playfield. I'm worried about water runoff, whether it's 5 feet wide, 8 feet wide. I also don't feel that it's necessary, but please consider where the water is going to go. On the north side of the playfield, it already tends to be a little bit on the soggy side. If you added walkways over there, it would just become more soggy. And I don't think it's necessary to be creating, greater wet issues for a running track that nobody seems to be expressing a desire for. Also want to ask, because I don't know the answer to this, how would the restroom area, the new restroom area, be secured? Since it is in a park which is anchored by grade schools, the Highcrest School and the junior high, would it be locked except when games are being played? So I want you folks to consider the security aspect of it. That's it.
Thank you, Carol. Next on the screen, I see Kara Kozlowskis.
Good evening. Yeah, Kara Kozlowskis. I live at 407 Alpine Lane. I was mostly dialing in tonight to observe. However, I will speak to the comments that I've heard. I actually do live near, but not on the playfields, and I would be one of the people that would greatly benefit from and enjoy seeing a running path there. I was a runner in a former life. I enjoy running, but I've also had 10 knee surgeries. And so for me, running on streets and sidewalks is extremely unsafe, and I just can't do it. And so I've often lamented in our community that there's not a track nearby in the sense of like a school track, because for me, that rubberized surface is really safe for my knee. So I would be in favor of and would hope that there's going to be an option to accommodate some sort of a trail. For me, my hope would be that it has a surface that's safe for knees, whether it's something rubberized or that little bit of crushed limestone that's like on the side of the Green Bay Trail. I'm sure there's many other runners that could advise on what safe surfaces are, but that there'd be a safe surface and that there'd be some sort of a marking so that me or my kids could know the distance that we ran while we used the trail. The shape and the location of it wouldn't matter to me at all. And I will say that there are approximately 40 homes here on my little dead-end street, if you will. And I was texting as the comments were happening to ask some of my neighbors that do run. And 3 of them got back to me and said, absolutely, they would love the trail. And those other ones, incidentally, all have dogs. We do go walking at night. Once my kids are in bed, that's my chance to get out. And now that it's dark early, I enjoy being able to walk in the evening. And we have gone through the play fields and found out that unless we have flashlights, we can't do that. So if there was some sort of a low lighting that wasn't offensive to the neighbors around it, I think that would be helpful too. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, I see Van Economou.
Yes, my name is Van Economou. I'm at 601 Hunter Road, close to also, but not on the park. I have a couple comments. First one is regards the funding. I've had funding concerns. I voiced them before. One of the things that I noted was that I was concerned that because there was this IGA fund that was available to the park board, they would find ways to spend it irrespective of its effect on the taxable community that is ending up having to pay for it. And the other thing is, I was wondering, and my concern was with regard to shortchanging some of the parks that have this IGA funding, because there would be things on the regular budget that would have been brought over and funded by the IGA. And specifically, I note that somebody has noted to me that the proposal for a restroom in Centennial, I'm sorry, in the community playfield had originally been on the regular budget, park board budget, but then when this funding appeared from the IGA agreement, it all of a sudden migrated over there. And the other comment I'd like to make is with regard to the hard surface running track. It seems to me a little ironic that the payment for the by the homeowners in Wilmette is dependent on how much impervious surfaces they have in their property, and it's the rate of their charges really are dependent on the amount of impervious surface. And now we're talking about adding additional impervious surfaces to the park, which has all this green space and can absorb water. Now we want to add additional hard surfaces that will be not impervious. It's kind of ironic. I find that on the one hand, we're trying to decrease the amount of impervious surface, but then we're increasing it on the other hand. So those are my comments.
Thank you. Next, I see John Hager. Mr. Hager, you're gonna have to unmute yourself.
Can
There
you
you
hear
go.
me now?
Yes, we can.
I live at 2525 Marion Lane in Wilmette, next to Mrs. Rogalski. And what I would like to say is that there was a television show called America's National Parks, Its Best Idea. It seems to me that in Wilmette, the parks can be Wilmette's best idea. But to put in a walking track with a hard surface is just contrary to a best idea. It's really not a very good idea at all. I've lived here for 31 years at 2525 Marion. For most of those years, almost every day, 2/3 of those 31 years, I've been able to observe the park. There's very few people that walk around the circumference of it, except for school kids who use it for cross country where there's a soft surface. So I think there's not a need that's been demonstrated in the first place. Aesthetically, to put in a costly cement or other similar type surface seems to me to be a huge expenditure that doesn't have a cost benefit to it. Complemented by stanchion lights or bollard lights, it changes the whole dynamic of the park. 30 years ago, the park board wanted to do a similar thing by putting in lights and a running track. And in a series of public hearings, which I attended, the citizens of Wilmette said they didn't want to do that. I think if the citizens of Wilmette were asked again, they would say the same thing. The next thing I would say is that this money, the $3 million, to me is a tax that is being paid by the Village of Wilmette taxpayers, who are also the Park District taxpayers. And it's simply a transfer of money that has no basis really in law. The school district, rather the Park District, has allowed the village to use its property to make a flood basin. There's no damage that occurs there except a minimal stoppage of usage. There's a restoration of the facility by the village, and then a payment of $3 million or more, which must be used for one of these three parks. There shouldn't be that kind of a transfer of tax money. They should be used exclusively for the flood control. And so that the park then is just shopping for a purpose to spend the money, because if it doesn't spend it for these three parks, it can't be used. To me, that's highly irresponsible. Apart from aesthetics, apart from the need, it's just usage of money that has no real purpose to it. And I think that this project needs a lot more study for both the walk around track, for the restrooms, which would have to be open at night. There's virtually no part of it that has any real need, purpose, or public service to the utilization of this park as a green space.
We're at 3 minutes.
So
I'm sorry, could I interrupt? What was your name again? The speaker, this is Mike Murdoch.
My name is John Hager, and I live at 2525 Marion Lane.
Thanks, John.
Great, thank you. Next on the screen, I see Briz Shaw.
Hi, good evening. Hi, everyone. My name is Briz Shaw. I'm at 2427 Pomona Lane, and I'm with the community, a vast majority who spoke against the walk path and the restroom. And I understand that you guys probably already have a plan to put restroom. And if it has to be, I suggest, as I suggested last time, kind of makes sense that is done aesthetically nicely and a decent size that is not overwhelming, probably by the tennis court. And I do want to say again, one more time, that you listened to the community last year. You saved the trees. I suggest that you should focus more on beautifying the park more, plant more trees, as all of you have attested last year. You promised that you're going to have more trees, make it more beautiful. I don't see a reason why, as I listen to everybody else, and I agree. I am barely 2 years into Wilmette. I grew up not too far from there for the last 30 years. And I come to Wilmette often. And I don't see people walking and running a lot after 8, 9 p.m. I don't see a reason to bring more noise pollution or traffic pollution of any kind in the park. I say you spend those money on cultivating another park, perhaps. As I don't remember the name or address of the park that Amy Wolf and others were discussing in the last meeting. Perhaps you spend $500,000 somewhere else to cultivate another park. But why mess around with such a beautiful park? It's beautiful at night to look at the stars. It's great for the children, great for people who wants to walk at night with a flashlight, possibly even. Let's leave it alone. I think spend money elsewhere. And for God, I hope you don't put that restroom in the middle of the park, as everybody has noticed. I think you guys are listening to the community. So definitely listen to them again and say and do the right thing and spend money elsewhere. That's probably more important instead of just more cement, more concrete that we already have underground concrete, significant amount of concrete underground. I think it'll be a wise decision to think it over and do the right thing about making the park more greener, more beautiful than we all found. That's all.
Thank you, Brish. Next, I see Charlie Hargrave. Charlie Hargrave. Okay, we're going to move on. Next on the screen, I see Sophie.
Hi, Sophie Candido, 1221 Colgate Street, right by Thornwood Park. I'm just listening tonight. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Next on the screen, I see Richard Pinner.
Thank you, Steve. Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes.
Thanks, everybody. My name is Richard Pinner. I live at 2443 Pomona Lane. with my wife and my 2 daughters. For the last 2 meetings, I've either had more to say than 3 minutes that we're granted at each meeting, or unable to attend in person, and have therefore written to you. Unfortunately, you've failed to respond or answer specific questions that I've asked, and I find that somewhat disappointing. Nevertheless, I wish to make a simple point this evening and start by highlighting page 2 of the comprehensive annual financial report contained in tonight's packet, which was page 76 of the 203-page PDF that I reviewed. This page shows the organization chart of Wilmette Park District and starts with the Wilmette residents at the very top, followed by the Board of Park Commissioners and then the Park District staff. This definitively shows that you, the board, are in your positions to act on behalf of and in the best interests of us, Wilmette's residents, and the staff to take direction from you based on the votes you take as a board and the decisions you make through the various committees you sit on. As I have previously written, your apparent lack of care and concern shown with the frivolous spending opportunity you're presented with within the IGA to make so-called park improvements is, in my opinion, with complete disregard of the interests of Wilmette's residents, and at a time of austerity. It now becomes clear that it was always someone's plan to build restrooms in our parks, as it previously featured as a line item in your capital budget, but has since been removed. Presumably because of this free pot of cash you've managed to bribe out of the village pocket.
Mr. Pinner, I don't mean to interrupt, but we're having a very hard time hearing you. It's gotten very static.
I don't know if I can change my microphone. Is that better?
No, it's unfortunately the same. I guess I don't know how to resolve it, but I know I see a lot of faces looking like they're having a hard time hearing you.
He started off fine.
No,
So
it could be my daughter's watching Netflix before bed.
There you go.
there you go.
You just cleared up. Please go.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm not sure where you started losing me. Let me at least start with, as I have previously written, your apparent lack of care and concern shown with the frivolous spending opportunity you're presented with within the IGA to make so-called park improvements is, in my opinion, with complete disregard of the interests of Wilmette's residents and at a time of austerity. It now becomes clear that it was always someone's plan to build restrooms in our park, as it was previously featured as a line item in your capital budget, but has since been removed, and presumably because of this free pot of cash you managed to bribe out of the village pocket. If restrooms are one or more or personal legacy objectives as commissioners, I and many others, and actually the majority of people that have engaged with you and objected to you directly, ask for your sincere consideration to the placement and location within community playfields. It may sound hypocritical, but of the 3.3 million you're trying your hardest to spend, we ask that you spend a few thousand of that, more than the lowest projected cost for restrooms, and place them in option A or B locations, not in option C. Please follow your hearts and have compassion towards the preservation of open space, space that you are the guardians of on our behalf. Do not create additional resistance and objection from those that you serve with another lit, impermeable surface in Wilmette. There are plenty already. Follow us and vote no to a path around our park. There is already one running through the middle of it. Thank you for the opportunity to speak and for your consideration of these points.
Thank you, Mr. Pinner. Next on the screen, I see Rick Prohoff.
Good evening, Rick Prohoff, 2435 Pomona Lane, which is on the north side of the park, nearer to the High Crest School. I'm not going to repeat a lot of the comments. We only get these 3 minutes. They're brief. What I can't seem to find is the video recordings of these meetings Are they available? Are there recordings available? Because the process of approving minutes, which I fail to understand how July got skipped, and I really don't understand the process now. You guys have not followed the law of the Open Meetings Act that require these to be done in a specific order at a specific time. And now, even when you are trying to catch up, somehow you've skipped July. And I think July is a very important meeting. I have asked for information about the irrigation system and how it was approved and what it provided and when. It went outside, apparently, the original intent of the IGA and its terms. Not having been able to go through the minutes, but to watch it being constructed in advance. It was not considered ever to have been other than a park approval for which you were supposed to seek input first before it being conducted. Now, I'm not without compassion. I haven't come to understand why we don't see minutes from March, April, May, June. But you get into July, you got to skip them now? That doesn't make any sense to me. How could you approve minutes out of order unless you're going backwards to try to perhaps be sure they say what you want them to say? So if there's no recordings, because generally we've been able to go back and see the minutes, not only by themselves, but be able to go witness the entire meeting, which is no longer available or was never put up. How is that? So Steve, I'm going to ask you again, can I get the information about the irrigation system and how it was approved? Are there recordings available to the public so that we can see the full context of how you guys discussed each of the improvements and when? Because it seems to me
I'm afraid
Did
it's
Mr.
frozen.
Prohoff freeze for
Rick's
everybody? I believe he
He's
just,
frozen for me. Yeah, he froze for me.
okay, hopefully he can reconnect before we're done here. Let's see if he comes back to us. Looking next on the screen, I think we've made the first pass through. I did get a message from Kara Kozlaskos that her daughter also wished to speak, Caroline. So Caroline.
Hi, I'm Caroline, and I'm an 8th grader at Wilmette Junior High. So myself and multiple other students at the junior high walk to and from school almost every day. And towards the winter months, when it gets dark really soon, we end up walking in the dark a lot, especially when we have after-school activities and we're staying later. Now you might say, oh, well, you could just walk down some of the big streets like Wilmette Avenue that have really big lights. But the truth is, I just don't feel as safe walking on Wilmette Avenue than inside the playfields. They don't need to be huge lights, even if they're just small next to the sidewalk. Something so we can see where we're going and not trip over the sidewalk, you know? Thank you.
Thank you, Caroline. I do believe
Carol,
that,
I just like, can I just say thank you, Carolyn. I appreciate especially young people participating in their government, and we enjoy hearing from you. Thank you. That's all.
great. I do believe that is everybody. If I've missed anyone, please unmute yourself and jump in now.
Steve, I sent
Oh,
Rick.
I see another name now. Barbara Keir. Barbara.
I didn't really have anything. I just was observing.
Great, thank you.
Okay.
Did Rick try to get
Mr.
back in?
Prohoff is rejoining us right now, so let's give him a chance to finish once he gets fully connected here. Rick, welcome back. Why don't you unmute yourself and continue, please?
am I still on?
Yeah, there you go. We can hear you.
Move on.
No, go ahead. It's yours.
Just to finish up, another reason why these Zoom meetings can only go so far. I was about to say that to Ms. Koslowskis, who's the runner with the bad knees, that we were shocked to find out from you, Steve, that you intended to have it either asphalt or concrete, because we were originally.
I'm afraid we lost him.
Yeah.
I'm going to give him a second to just unstick here. Let's see if he comes back. All right, Commissioner Anderson, I believe it's your decision on how you want to proceed.
I'll tell you, why don't we keep going, and if there's an appropriate point later on, but it sounds like he's got issues at his local connection, and this may just be something that continues. But let's go through the.
Wait, I believe he's unfrozen now. I see him moving.
Okay.
Rick, you're muted right now.
My wife is watching the town hall, so I don't get the good access here. Let's see if that, is that any better?
Yes.
Hopefully.
So I'll keep it short because I've wasted enough of your time with my silly machine here. But was it not true that you are proposing a concrete path? And I mean, that's what you told us. So I think there's a lot of need to slow this down. Your minutes are out of order. Your process is out of order. And to the extent there's no rush to this, one of the other gentlemen mentioned that we had a similar issue 30 years ago. I've lived here for over 30 years. And what Phyllis Kosarek and Terry Porter at the time did is they appointed an ad hoc citizens committee to actually take testimony and discover with the board what did the public really want. And this is another major expenditure. And it disturbs me that the process has not been followed. And I do understand that the pandemic has made hell for all of us. We are all under great pressure. We had to readjust our priorities, how we do business, how we do these meetings. I'm not without compassion. I understood. I think Mike told me about your staff member. It's terrible. But all the more reason why to slow it down and not speed it up. We're all upset that the lake is being destroyed. But to repeat, and then I'm done. Please don't destroy this park in a way where, as Abbott always said, there should be no losers. We understand you need bathrooms. We're not thrilled about it, but you've made your point. We understand the thing about the shelter too. I'm not thrilled to support it, but we do understand it. And I have to remind you from a year ago about the trees. We reached a compromise, but only after we went to the public online and got over 500 signatures in 30 days. Now we haven't done that. I don't think most of the public is aware of how the minutes are totally out of order and that you've proceeded with an irrigation system that went beyond the original intent of the IGA. So we'll have another day. I look forward to talking to each of the board members. I'm trying to reach out to each of you individually to hear your thoughts in less than a 3-minute situation online where there's no real discourse or dialogue. And when I can't get information and I can't get minutes and I can't get recordings, it's just not right. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Anderson, I believe it's yours now.
Okay, the next item on the agenda is the stormwater project update from the village.
Sure. Joining us tonight, we have Bridget Berger-Raish from the village staff, as well as Darren Olson from Christopher Burke Engineering. I believe Darren is going to dive into a presentation. Also joining us tonight, we have Tom Richlick from Gewalt Hamilton and Associates, if there are any questions that are best handled by him. So Darren, when you're ready, take it away.
Good evening. So Steve, can you see my screen?
I can.
Wonderful. Well, thank you. Good evening. And thanks again, Park District Commissioners, Executive Director Wilson, for inviting us to present tonight. We have a fairly short presentation where we will provide some details on the final design of the Hibbard Park project. So tonight we're going to provide a summary of the areas where revisions were made. And if you recall, last month we had a presentation where we had our pre-final plans, which were very, very well developed. And based on that, we got some great feedback from the commissioners and from Executive Director Wilson. And we have made changes to several of those plans, which we'll talk about tonight, specifically the drainage plans and the manhole locations, as well as the grading plan that has been coordinated extensively with Park District staff and their consultant. So those are the two plans that have changed, and we'll talk about those in detail. Finally, we'll talk about the plat of easement, both the temporary and permanent easements over this facility, and then get into next steps, which much of which you've seen before. So this is a plan that you've seen last month, and I'll go through it in a little bit of detail here. It's changed slightly. In this plan, north is generally to our right. So you can see at the bottom of the screen, US 41 Skokie Boulevard is down there. This is the northern part of Hibbard Park. You see on the top of the screen, Hill Street, where Hill Street is dead ends into the park. And what we have here is the drainage plan. So these are the storm sewers and the under drains that will be in the park to serve the park, really. You can see that there's a jagged outline. That is the outline of the storm trap, which will be completely underground. And then we see some flow arrows. Those are the big blue arrows, which show which way the ground will be sloped to pitch the park to a series of inlets, which are shown in green, that are connected to a storm sewer system that's shown in blue, that all wraps around the park and then eventually drains out into the same storm sewer system where water is leaving the storm trap. It all is going west down Hill Street. So a couple of the highlights here, things that have changed. We have I'll start with the black storm trap access vents. We have one on the south leg of the storm trap unit that is tucked away well outside of the baseball field, and there was not an objection to that last month. We did move one from last month. You see there's on the very northern side of the park, even north of the sidewalk that is there. We've placed the second vent structure at that location. And these vent structures look like, on the surface, just your typical 2-foot diameter metal manhole grate. So that's what these vents will look like on the surface. What they do, to review from last month, as water is coming into the storm trap unit underground, this allows air to escape and allows the unit to fill up with water most efficiently. We also have then a series of green dots that are the inlet structures, and these look identical to the vent structures. They're your typical 2-foot diameter metal manhole grates. And we've got a series of them, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 that are on this sheet. 6 of these that we've pushed as absolutely far to the perimeter of the park as possible. And we're aware of drainage concerns at this park. We've seen the photos that have been provided by the Park District's consultant. And so we've moved these into the low areas. And specifically, we've moved these as absolutely far away from the play fields as possible. And there's 3 of them that I'd like to bring to your attention. The first is the southernmost one, which is by what you would call the right field line of that ball field. And we have moved that, so now it is 25 feet away from the baseball field. We've moved that an additional approximately 13 feet further outside of the field than it was previously. And that's really as far as we can move it without starting to impact the parking lot and trees along that area. The second, as we move towards the west, towards Hill Street, we see a second manhole, and this was one that was where concern was raised. The green one there, and we've pushed that one now, so it's 22 feet out of the baseball field and 18 feet out of what would be any proposed soccer field there. And that's really as far as we can move that without getting it into the root zone of some of the trees there. So we've really kind of crammed that as close to the trees as we possibly can and able to do some drainage modifications there as well. And finally, the last one is at the northeast corner as we get closer to Skokie Boulevard. That one we've tucked, that's 23 feet away from the potential soccer field that would be there. And we've tucked that one up, like much of the rest of these inlets, really close to the sidewalk. So they're already in an area where you wouldn't want to be playing ball because of or running out into there because of the sidewalk. So we've tried to tuck these as close to that area as possible. The remaining ones in orange are buried, so those won't be on the surface. And the blue is 12-inch under drain. That line is 12-inch under drain. You see a lot of black lines, and that's really this elaborate network of under drains that are going to be under the outfield and under the soccer fields. So that's how this plan has changed since you've seen it last, and this is in the final plans. And up next is the site grading plan. And we still have some of the flow arrows here, and I've kept the inlets on as well, just to show that how generally the ball field, outfield is going to be crowned. The soccer fields are generally going to be crowned, such that they're all pitching away and draining towards these green inlet structures. A couple of items on here in the color that are worthy of noting. With a lot of great collaboration with the Park District and their consultant, we have added this beige-ish area here is actually a warning track that is at the outfield limit, I'll call it, of the baseball field there. So that would be a gravelish type warning track there that would have an under drain under it that would drain very efficiently, as well as provide that warning track type feel for that baseball field. We also have in green, and for those that are familiar with the park, which I'm sure all of you are, there is a mound on the eastern side of the park that is, you can see some of these circular contours here. That's the existing mound that is along the sidewalk. And legend has it, it's there to keep balls and other things from the field going into to Skokie Boulevard. And what we've done is in working with Park District staff and their consultant, we've essentially extended that to be the green area now. So the existing mound is approximately 4 to 5 feet high. This green area would be approximately 4 feet high, and would essentially provide an outfield backstop for the entire outfield of the baseball field, while still allowing for, as you can see here, is provided to us 3 red soccer fields as well. So those are the two, really the only two things that have changed since the last presentation. So we wanted to bring those to your attention, to let you know that your input was received, and we've updated the plan accordingly. We do have here, the second to last slide is a plat of easement, very similar to community playfields. This is showing where the temporary easement is the lighter gray, where construction vehicles, workers will be walking, where movement can occur by construction folks. And then a permanent easement, which will be the location that the village will have rights to in case they need to go in and repair any of the storm sewers or storm trap system. This exhibit is oriented just like the other ones, but it's showing the full park. So you can see Glenview Road, you can see Wilmette Avenue, and Hill Street. And we see in the darker gray is really the outline of the storm trap facility, the pump station, the storm sewers coming in and out of that storm trap facility. And with that, just some next steps. We're looking to get Park District approval of the final plan as well as the easements. The village is moving forward very quickly, hoping to award a contract in November so that we can get all the pieces in place to start construction in January or February of 2021 on the park site to get that done as early in the year as possible. And with that, I do not have a last slide that says questions, but I'm certainly willing at this point to take any questions that anyone may have.
I see Commissioner Murdoch has put his hand up.
Yeah, two things. First off, I think this was an excellent presentation. It was especially helpful to compare and contrast what you did before, so thank you very much for it. I had trouble seeing how the endpoint, but I can see. So thank you. I don't have a question for you. I do have a question for Steve, and that is with this sort of raised mound in this warning track, if my memory serves me, I believe those baseball fields are generally used for 4th and 5th grade boys. With this configuration, will this ball field be able to be used for girls softball or for other things as well? Because it seems like it'll be a really nice field that more folks in our community might want to use.
Yes, for sure. I think, as I shopped the design around with board members, I did have a couple board members point out that it could be a real opportunity for new programming in conjunction with the fitness center and other things and that we haven't yet to even conceive. So we use those fields not just for baseball. We use them for camps. We use them for our after-school programs. Those are pretty heavily used fields for many purposes beyond baseball.
Great, thank you.
I see that Commissioner Abbott has his hand up as well.
Of course he does. Thank you, Darrell. A few questions. Like community playfields, this gets pumped out. If there's an extreme storm event, say from I think we've been counting on like a 3-inch rainfall as a 10-year rainfall. If this, what overflows first? Not the park, right? Where does the excess water go?
That's a great question. It's very similar to community playfields. The lowest spot within this drainage system is still roads such as Kilpatrick, Valley View, and Phelan. Those roads south of Glenview are the lowest spots. And so if we get a rain event that exceeds the capacity of the storm trap system, the first place that water will begin to pond is going to be the lowest spot in the system, which are those 3 roads.
And how much lower are those than these fields? How much water gets into those roads before the fields would start to feel it?
Good question. So the fields, the lowest elevation of the fields is going to be approximately elevation 622.
622. Yep.
Those roads are anywhere from about 619.5 to 620.
All right, so about 2 feet. Okay. Obviously, the drain pipe that you put along Skokie, you've taken. I think you answered the question. I wrote this question down, but damage to the tree root lines. You feel that you're outside of those root zones and far away from the field as you could get. You're not going to damage the tree roots. Those are big trees.
That's correct. One of the items that I'll note on this plan, you see some squiggly lines here. Yeah. That is actually some sheet piling that we're going to be using to make sure that we are as far away from those root zones as possible while also being able to complete the excavation. And we've had, I think now, 3 meetings with the village forester out there where we've laid out the limits of excavation. So we're feeling good that we've been able to balance the needs of the construction versus certainly those very significant trees out there.
How are those sheet pilings going to be removed?
Yes, they will.
Okay, and how deep are they going? About 15 feet or?
The actual full depth of them, the actual sheets themselves are 20 feet, but in many cases, the amount of face that you'll see will be at some places as minimal as 3 feet. In other places, it'll be more significant, like by these trees. exposed face of that sheet pile will be greater because it's further away from the trees that we're trying to protect.
You know if they're going to be vibratory or pile driven?
We don't know that yet. That's something that we're working with the contractors on, and we'll be, throughout the bid process, we'll be working with them.
Okay, either one, has its drawbacks in terms of either potential damage or noise and vibration levels. Unfortunately, there's no houses too close to them. All right. The warning track, that's integral to your drainage system, right? I mean, is that going to be a maintenance issue for us? That has to, in order for the field drainage to work right, that's got to stay clean.
I'll start to answer that, and maybe I can have.
Yeah, I can weigh in on that, Darren, if you want.
Yeah, so
Sure.
I will say from a grading perspective, we did grade it so that the natural flow would be along this warning track towards these two inlets. But
Okay.
I know Tom has a lot more information on that mix.
Yeah, Tom, you're the sports guy. Go ahead.
Thanks, Brian. And thank you guys for asking. The warning track is consistent with most high school and higher athletic fields. As you run towards the outfield, you try to prevent the guy from running headlong into the fence when he's looking over his shoulder at
Sure.
a fly ball. But also, what we're using it here in a drainage perspective, the warning track stone is something that's used that I've used at multiple fields in the region as a drainage medium. It flows in the same manner as an open graded stone. The under drain underneath will collect that water. And especially with the field draining from the infield towards the outfield and then the berm draining down towards it, that warning track will sort of be a catch, a low point all the way around that arc. But by using that stone and the under drain, all that water should be collected. That beige area that Darren's highlighted will be a 200 and some foot long inlet, essentially.
Sure.
Maintenance of it will be just the same as the infields of your baseball field. So they'll rake it to keep it smooth. They'll replace material annually, just like they would an infield for the baseball field. So they have to manage the edges as much. They don't get as much wear as like second base and first base, where you get a lot of the casting. But it is maintained in the same way the baseball field materials are.
But is it going to be just coarse stone, or has it got fines in it? Is it going to be like the warning tracks I usually see, which would be kind of clayish, or is it going to be open gravel?
It will be evenly graded stone. It's a gradation that Wapaka Sand and Gravel and I, the engineer at their firm, the gravel supplier firm, and I worked on years ago for this exact application where I'm trying to get water in through the warning track. So it'll stay firm like a walking track, but it passes water like Vulcan 210 or CA7 or even graded stone. So there's no fines. It's essentially washed out. The smallest gradation is, I think, 1/16 of an inch, but it's anywhere from 3/8 to 16 inch, usually red granite.
Okay, so 16th inch would be the smallest, so it's fairly tight.
Correct.
Not loose gravel. Okay.
It's not loose gravel, but it doesn't have any fines, so water passes through.
Okay. All right. Well, we need to, guys, might as well talk about it. We're going to need to irrigate this. I don't know, Tom, Steve, or Daryl, I don't know if anybody's talked about this.
No, we don't believe we're going to need to irrigate it here. It's, while heavily used, not used nearly as intensively as soccer fields are. So the need here is not as great as it is at community playfield.
Part of the reason at community playfield was that we just don't have a lot of soil on top of the tank. What's there's some of the tank, slipping into the ball field and soccer fields. How much, we've got drainage underneath it as well. So how much do we have on top of the tank? How much dirt?
Approximately.
Inches, feet?
You have, at the least amount, you'll have approximately 2 feet of soil on top of the tank. Then obviously at the mound area, you'll have significantly more than that, approximately 7 feet in the green areas shown on the exhibit.
So is that enough to support grass in, reasonable sort of semi-drought situations, or am I going to get a jagged line, an outline of the tank where those, either too dry or too wet in those areas?
The underdrain system that's proposed in there, which should keep the moisture level static throughout it. The tank is different than community playfields. This tank is a sealed top. So the water that's going to perk into it will perk through the underdrains. So you should see a very uniform color of your outfield. It will be affected more by drought conditions. It'll brown out just like any other turf grass, but it'll do it evenly. You won't see this. The evidence of this tank, I couldn't imagine you'd see any of that evidence of that tank. You'd see more of the wear and tear. You'd hopefully you see the wear and tear of the poor kid in right field that no one's hitting to. So
Kicking the tufts of grass. So sealed top. Is that? I mean, is that like sealed or just small percolation? I'm actually like to keep the water off the concrete.
So the tank itself it'll have what's called mastic, which is kind of a black tape that will connect at the joints of the two storm trap pieces. So it's not 100% waterproof, but is very, very water resistant because we don't want water percolating into this tank during a non-flood event because number one, we want to keep that storage available, but number two, we have to pump all that water out. This one, unlike community, so here that you're correct, the top will be sealed.
Okay, all right. Thank you. Those are my questions. I'll go back to mute.
Commissioner Anderson, I am not seeing anyone else who's raised their hand via Zoom, so back to you.
Okay, sounds great. Before we go on to the next topic, anybody got anything? All right, we'll move to the voucher list. Could we get a motion to approve?
Yes, I move we approve the voucher list in the amount of $1,303,944.28. A copy of which is to be attached to and become a permanent part of the minutes of this meeting.
I'll second.
Okay, anybody got any questions on the voucher list? I have one, but I can wait. Anybody else got questions on the voucher list?
I would just note that Superintendent Foy is looking at a way to capture and report on expenses, and that is just going to be something we'll see in early 2021. So as endearing as the voucher list report is, as it is now, it is coming in a new and improved format in time.
All right.
I had a question. Is it legal for me to talk?
No, sorry. You're forever banned. No, I'm just teasing. No, the time has come and gone for the public input. Sorry, but there's plenty of opportunities coming up.
Was for regarding the vouchers was the thing.
Yeah, no, you're welcome to send us a note or ask the next meeting. But at this point, we are past the public input. Sorry. But Steve, I'll ask a question for you. There's a line item for tree replacement for parks. And I was just wondering how that kind of plays into the landscape planning or why would we be doing tree replacements without a plan, or maybe we do have a plan for that park.
Sure. Those are trees for Mallinckrodt, where we've had trees that have suffered and died over the last couple of years, and just replacing trees that have died. And we do have a landscape plan for Mallinckrodt. If you remember, that was a park that was developed more recently with a referendum, and there was a landscape plan there.
Okay, great. Thank you. That was my only question. It's so sad to see this voucher list go.
I don't know what Julia and Sheila are cooking.
She has a vision and I support it.
Okay.
For more transparency. Yeah, more transparency.
A new set of eyes. That's great.
Love it.
Should we take a roll call vote on the voucher list?
We should. Commissioner
Hey,
Abbott.
Mike, I think you might have feedback on your line.
Yes, on the voucher list.
Commissioner Murdoch.
Yes.
Commissioner Schisler.
Yes.
Commissioner Clark.
Yes.
Commissioner Wolf,
Yes.
Commissioner Goebel,
Yes.
Commissioner Anderson.
Yes.
Voucher list is approved.
Okay, well, now it's time to hear from Executive Director Wilson.
Sure. Much of the first part of my report was related to stormwater, and we've covered that quite extensively already. The only part to that is under new business, you do have the consideration of the easements, both temporary and permanent, for Hibbard Park. And then ultimately next month at the board meeting, we're going to be approving the final plans. And that is the last step in regards to Hibbard Park, and then the village will go out and do their bids and issue their contracts. But under new business, you have the easements. Before I go any further, I do want to inform the board that you may be aware that we're missing a face on this meeting that's normally here. Superintendent Solberg's not with us tonight as they welcome their third child today. Bowden Richard was born, so we wish them nothing but the best in the sleepless nights ahead. Getting back to the report, golf cart path bids were opened last week. We've been working with Tom from Gaywald Hamilton, who you've heard from tonight, to review those bids, talk to the low bidders. All bids came in higher than budget, but Tom has been working with both myself and the golf staff as well as the contractors to get the number back in line with budget. We were successful today in doing so. So he's putting together all that final documentation. The other side of that project is the financing portion of it that the board has asked us to pursue a 20-year issuance. In our conversation with financial institutions, the idea of a private placement 20-year repayment on a debt certificate was not received favorably by anybody. They were looking for 10 to 12 years if it was going to be a private placement. We can still pursue a 20-year option and do what's called a public placement, which is more of an open bid sort of concept. Usually those are reserved for much larger bond issuances than what we're talking about. To do a public issuance, you do need, or a public placement, you do need to go through the Moody's ratings process. We do have a call set up for next week for that if we want to pursue it. The cost of doing a ratings is about $10,000, so it would add to the overall cost of the financing. And I remember when we looked at the financing options, the 20-year option versus the 10-year option, there was some cost differences there too. So we have more we need to look at and more we need to talk about. We're still awaiting some pieces to the financing puzzle back from Piper Sandler, but sometime next week, maybe Tuesday or Wednesday next week, maybe we'll be able to have a special board meeting, another one of these Zoom calls to discuss the bid details as well as the financing options and make a decision whether we want to move forward or not. We're still waiting on some more information before we can determine that. Moving away from that topic, really just to update you, we're ongoing with our budget process. The first committee to review its budget will be on Monday night. The Financial Planning and Policy Committee will review the administration budget as well as kind of the non-operating funds such as debt service and IMRF and Social Security and some of those options. And then lastly, sticking with finance, when we get to the Financial Planning and Policy Committee report, remember last month we didn't get a final PDF version of the audit from the auditors in time for the meeting, so we deferred it. Now we have it. It's in your packet. That's why the packet is 203 pages long. And you'll be considering that motion to accept the audit underneath the Financial Planning and Policy Committee. That concludes my report, and I see that Commissioner Murdoch has his hand up.
I just had a quick question about the golf cart path financing with respect to a private placement. It's counterintuitive to me that we would get feedback that a 20-year private placement is not possible at any price. And I'm going to say something that's extreme and not intended to be serious, but I assume if we went back to our bond consultant and said, we're interested in paying 25% interest, I would hope that we could find somebody who would be interested in working with us. Now, obviously, we're not contemplating that, but it seems to me that it would make sense to get some information about what interest rate premium investors would look for. So we would have that information to compare it to the cost of a public placement, the $10,000 you mentioned, to see which option might be more viable. Am I missing something?
Nope, that's exactly what we've requested and are waiting for. So you're exactly on the right lines.
Okay, thank you. That's all I had.
Okay, I don't see anyone else's hands up, but I'm happy to take any other questions. Okay, back to you, Commissioner Anderson.
All right, on to the committee reports. We've got the Lakefront Committee, Commissioner Abbott.
Yes, well, we have had two committee of the whole meetings this past month. And I want to thank all the commissioners for all the time they've been putting into this. Before that, I want to just say the season is over. Again, thanks to staff for really rising to the occasion. We had a lot of public comments about getting the lakefront open and keeping it open. And I think the staff was fantastic. I know that's a sentiment that's shared by all the commissioners and the community. The fence is down. There was a fence that was put up along South Beach in order to keep crowding down to a minimum. It was taken down at the end. Well, it was, I think, September 28th. It came down. That was the day after we closed up shop with our staff. We kept a sort of a small crew on through September, just in case we had issues with regard to crowding or COVID. But going back to the two committee of the whole meetings, we had a meeting last Thursday, a week ago, with regard to soil erosion. This is the meeting where we did come out of the meeting with some things that we need to discuss and this board needs to consider in terms of next steps. We got a presentation by the Smith Group. There were two major portions that they considered. One was in the Gilson Park area. Most of those came down to ideas that could be pursued in order to either to give greater protection to the dune area or move the dune area back. My take on that was that commissioners were appreciative of the ideas, but that these would be more or less handed over to the master planner in terms of, do they generate any viable opportunities that the master planner would ask us to consider. So I'm going to ask for comments soon, but that was my take, is that there weren't any additional steps. And I do want to remind commissioners, this presentation basically wrapped up the planning and that the Smith Group was hired to do. I wanted to sort of remind you that, because if we need to move forward, we might need to open up conversations with the Smith Group again. So let's move on to Langdon. Langdon, soil erosion. The number of ideas were presented. Was my take, and I want people to chime in, that by and large, the tow repair at Langdon Beach was tow repair and bluff stabilization. By bluff stabilization, we mean planting, green plantings that help anchor the soil and hold it together. But down near the water, the high water level, there's a tow down there that previous boards, previous park districts about 30 years ago put in a lot of stone down there. It's done its job. It's protected the bluff in this unprecedented high water, but it's also tired and might be in need of either restoration or augmentation. Those two issues, bluff stabilization through plantings and tow repair, seem to me, by my ears, further worthy of further consideration. There were other discussions with regard to access, stairs that got down to the beach. I think boards have been considering those for a long time. I think that given the current high water conditions, any sort of permanent structures in what seems to be a relatively unstable environment might wish to be deferred to a later date. Those are my takeaways. I'd like the board to chime in if I've got it right or wrong. It would imply, the way I see it, as perhaps continuing some conversations with regard to this tow repair and bluff stabilization. So I've talked enough. Anybody have any comments? Did you hear it differently, or am I getting it wrong? What should the Lakefront Committee do? I'll turn off.
You're specifically asking about Langdon at this point, or are you talking about both ends?
Langdon, but you know, if you want to comment on Gilson, my feeling was that we came away from Gilson as these were intriguing ideas, but not actionable yet. That they should be run to the filter of the master plan, and there was no takeaway at this time for Gilson. We'd let the master planner and the commissioners continue to talk about these ideas. That was my takeaway. So mostly Langdon. So again, how do you feel?
Well, with regards to Gilson, I think we're still owed by Smith Group them taking the various solutions that they offered up, sort of the menu that they've got, but then also marrying the ballpark costs that go along with each of them. If you recall, they sort of gave us costs per linear foot, and they gave us drawings of the various things that they were thinking about doing or having us think about doing, but didn't marry the two up. And so I believe, in my opinion, there's an open item still left for them to finish that project of marrying up their suggestions to ballpark costs.
I think that's fair, and I think that's accurate.
Okay.
Anybody else? Absent any further comments, I'm going to say that I'm going to recommend and say that the Lakefront Committee will be considering next steps with regard to Langdon at our November meeting. And I again appreciate the board's, it's a lot of time put in, and I appreciate all the time you've put in and the comments, which have been very helpful. Thank you. So that wraps up that committee of the whole last Thursday. We had another committee of the whole meeting today, which I love this stuff. So it was the master planner. This was Woodhouse Tanucci and the Lakota group who led a walkthrough of all the commissioners, staff, and quite a few members of the public. We did a clockwise walkthrough, pausing every 100 feet to talk about possible enhancements, ideas, things that work well, things that need to be done better, like pedestrian flow and bike flow. And there's no actionable items coming away from this. I know that, I think the side conversation that Andy and the designers hope to have something for the November Lakefront Committee. That's pretty fast, but we're trying to get something done by March. So anything they can put together, a lot of notes. I thought it was helpful. I hope the other people got as much out of it as I do. Any comments on that?
I would agree. It was a great walking tour and a good opportunity to discuss points of interest, as well as hear input from the community, and certainly just the beginning of opportunities for community input.
And I do want to state, you brought up a great point, Julia, that there will be community meetings. This was primarily an opportunity for the commissioners to talk to each other and to kick around ideas and hear from the entire board. We did have members of the public there who were given some limited opportunity to speak, but there will be, coming, and I don't have a date, there will be community input meetings by the master planners where the commissioners aren't invited to speak. And we want to hear from the community with regard to their thoughts and ideas on Gilson Park. Thank you. That wraps up my report.
Thank you, Commissioner Abbott. We've got the Parks and Recreation Committee next. It's Commissioner Murdoch.
I'm hoping you can pass over me. I'll be ready in a couple of minutes, but during our meeting, I drove down to South Bend and I'm just getting situated so I can get back on the video.
All right, no problem. We'll come right back to you. We've got the Golf Committee, Commissioner Goebel. I'm sorry. Commissioner Wolf. Commissioner Wolf, sorry.
So sorry about that internet issues. So the golf committee met on September 28th. We had managers' reports. The weather has been really nice up to that point. We only had one rainy week in September. The fires that were raging in California at the time had caused some hazy fog on the course, so it was a little surreal to see some of the pictures of how hazy some of the mornings were there. You could really see the fog coming across. There was a female snapping turtle on the course that laid eggs. So the staff protected the area for 78 days. And when the eggs hatched, they put all the little baby snapping turtles in the North Branch of the Chicago River. So we did our part to help our ecological system over there. There was a very large tree that fell near the clubhouse. It was extremely old and it had been routed out in the center. Luckily, no one was hurt and there was very minimal damage as it was in an area that is projected to be where the cart path will go. So it was kind of fortuitous that it came down. They're continuing to put sand and top dress the greens, which is really helping that area. And they're also seeding stump holes and rough areas where it's needed, and they're using the nursery grass to fix it. So that's been a really good program to be able to have that grass to go in and patch up areas. We also heard that we think that they're going to finish the season at about a 30% increase of rounds, which is really great. It's been very busy from where we were last year. There have been several golf outings in September, so it's been nice to see some groups back on the course. Obviously, social distancing, wearing masks, and taking all the precautions. They also held the high school conference championship this year. It was the third time for the girls teams and the first time for the boys teams. And we've had an increase of about 25% in youth memberships. It just goes to show you how active our younger members of the community have been on the golf course. So it's nice to see them out there playing. August rounds averaged around 266 per day. So that's been really great as well. And we believe that the September rounds will be around 6,000 total, which is up about 2,000 from more than 2,000 from last year. So we're definitely seeing a large increase in the number of playable rounds at the course. Finally, financials are up about 30% this year based on our projections. So it's been a really good year out at the golf course. And then finally, we discussed the cart path project, which Mr. Wilson updated us on earlier. We're still just waiting for some final numbers on financing and bid costs. So we are waiting for staff to get back to us on that, and we could potentially have a committee of the whole meeting coming up here shortly to discuss those. And that's it. Any questions? Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Let's move to financial planning and Commissioner Goebel, and then we'll come back to Parks and Rec, Commissioner Murdoch after that.
Great. The Financial Planning and Policy Committee met on September 21st. We had a fairly lengthy agenda and we covered a number of items, which I'll recap now. First is we reviewed the comprehensive annual financial report, a copy of which is attached to the board agenda today, and approved it in committee, and noted that there were some distinctions as well with the financial compliance. So congratulations to Superintendent Foy, who inherited this, as well as Director Wilson, who helped ensure that everything was kept in order until Sheila arrived. Next, we reviewed the debt servicing options for the golf cart path. As we know, this is a project that we will use outside funding for, and so we're looking for the right solution, as Director Wilson recapped earlier. And then examined capital spending for the rest of the year, a copy of which is also in the packet today. Obviously we've reduced some of the capital spending down to the level of only the absolutely required projects that were either a matter of life safety or urgently needed, but have deferred most capital spending otherwise, and will probably continue to do so into 2021. Which leads me to the budget planning calendar. We reviewed the calendar and timing for budgeting, which is the season that we're beginning now as we prepare for 2021. The next financial planning and policy meeting is Monday, and we'll begin looking at a first pass. And Superintendent Foy has provided us the information we need to get started. From there, it's a series of meetings, all of which are open to the public to identify areas of spending. We recognize that recreation options will be different, especially during COVID. And so I think that we have our work cut out for us as we look at how we are cost effective, but also doing the right thing to ensure the community residents and non-residents have options over the winter and then obviously into the summer. So bittersweet as the summer ends, but we've got a lot of good things to look forward to ahead. And that concludes my report.
Anybody got any questions for Commissioner Goebel? I had, go ahead.
Just saying thank you. Did you have an item, Commissioner Anderson?
I did. In the audited statements, there's a footnote that talks about subsequent events and the impact of COVID on our operations. And since the letter is dated August 11th, I don't understand how we can say we have no idea what the impact of COVID is on our operations when we have a reasonably good view of what it is doing to our operations. So I'm sure there's some technical accounting gap thing that gives them support for not doing that. But I'm just curious as to what that might be.
Sure. They put that footnote in there to obviously be cautious, be very conservative, because while we have a feel for where things are and how things are going to play out, we also don't know everything down to the penny by any means, and we don't know how long it's going to extend. So it's really just from a kind of one of those abundance of caution point of views for the auditors. It's kind of a CYA.
Okay. If I was a user of these financial statements, I would be sort of like, seriously, you don't know by August really what's happening? But okay, as long as we ask the question.
It's going to be in every single governmental audit, for this year.
Right.
So we're not unique by any means.
No, I know. But in a lot of companies, it's going to end up meaning they have qualified opinions because they don't know what they're truly don't know what's going to happen to the business.
Right, but for the record, just for everyone watching, we did not receive a qualified opinion. We received the cleanest, highest level opinion.
Yep. Okay.
I do see Commissioner Murdoch has his hand.
I had two questions about the financials as well. I saw that there was a note that the audit fund was not just over budget, but also over the appropriation. It's a small amount of money, but what's the legal impact of that if we exceed our appropriation?
You're not supposed to exceed your appropriations, but I don't believe we did.
Yeah, Steve, you answered that question before for me in a written thing a couple months ago. And the reasoning we got back then was that because they applied to different fiscal years, like there was a timing of the payments as opposed to having it really go over what it was intended to cover.
Got it.
So, yeah.
And that may then answer the other question as well. I saw that the debt service fund was over budget. I assume those were no numbers. Why would they be over budget? But was that also a timing issue?
It was a timing issue with the debt that we issued very close to the end of the year. So the budgets were pretty much solidified and done, and then we did the bond issuance.
Got it. Makes sense. Thank you.
I see Commissioner Wolf has her hand up as well.
I had one question I noticed in the write-up at the end of our packet from Superintendent Foy regarding our projected expenses for 2020 through August, that it looks like we were able to kind of recalculate some things because our COVID, non-related COVID unemployment claims, it was the way that we've budgeted for it was changing. So we were dropping down, we were not saving, but we were getting 200.
Amy is paused for me. I don't know for anyone else.
Yep, for me too.
Yep, she looks like she just dropped out too. She actually dropped and reconnected right before we went to her for her report. So-
$60,000 back.
What?
Sorry.
You're back. Hello.
I'm so sorry. No, I was asking about Superintendent Foy had commented in her report that we were going to have a additional $260,000 towards our budget because we don't have to pay that in unemployment claims that are not related to COVID. Is that correct?
So what happened was we received a bill for the second quarter that had $270,000 worth of unemployment claims. And I put that into the projection. So it wasn't a budget issue, it was a projected expense that we thought we would be spending. And then later found out between the July and August financials that there will be some federal and state funding that's going to take care of all of the COVID related unemployment. So then the projected amount in the budget, which we were able to take that down because the non-COVID related unemployment claims are largely very, very, very small compared to the COVID related claims.
Okay, great. Thank you for clarifying.
Sure.
So Commissioner Foy, is that, I'm not Commissioner Foy, do we have then a receivable on the books for that from the government?
We do not. Because the expense, the liability is only the non-COVID related piece of it.
Okay, so they have been paid their unemployment, but not by us. It's been paid by the government, and they're not billing us for that. Is what you're saying?
That's correct.
Okay, gotcha.
That is correct.
Wonderful. Okay, great. One of the things I sent a note to Steve today was if we could look for the financial planning meeting coming up next, if we could look at the ongoing capital expenditures and sort of do a review of, especially the ones that are over $50,000, because just looking at it, I don't think we're going to spend all that money. And it may get to the point where with the good news you just gave us on the unemployment, we could almost break even for this year, which would be a hugely major accomplishment given the circumstances. So I'd like to ask that we kind of do a good once over on that for the Financial Planning and Policy Committee meeting. Because we've got 300,000 for this, 150,000 for that. It's not going to all get spent, and by the time you add it all up, I think we might save $500,000 and be at break even.
Yep, we can definitely take a look at it.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Thank you. One thing I wanted to just note, and the scope of our committee tends to primarily be financial, but we also have an obligation to review policies from time to time. And as part of that, we will be reviewing a series of policies, I believe it's 17 in all, that cover legal and compliance areas. And with respect to diversity, it is an appropriate time to review these periodically, and certainly this year is an excellent year to do so. As part of that, we will also be adopting an anti-racism stance, which candidly seems obvious that this would be a given, but I think at the same time it's appropriate for us to be demonstrative in saying we do not stand for any racist activities. And so a draft of the statement has been created, and it will be has been circulated, and we look forward to feedback from the rest of the board. And certainly as the policy review continues, and we will be reviewing in chunks over the next several months, we will also be discussing in committee and then sharing with the board progress that is being made in that regard. And this initiative is being led by Lindsay and is doing a fine job, and will be guided by Steve. And then obviously we will be sharing with all of you the outcomes of that. Of course, keep us posted and ask us any questions along the way. And then as a last item, I can move to approve the audit at this time. So I move to accept the comprehensive annual financial report for the fiscal year ending December 31st, 2019.
Second.
And Steve, should we have a roll call?
Yes.
If it's
Thank
that
you.
time, Commissioner Anderson, yes, let's do a roll call. Commissioner Abbott?
Yes.
Commissioner Murdoch?
Yes.
Commissioner Schisler?
Yes.
Commissioner Clark?
Yes.
Commissioner Wolf?
Yes.
Commissioner Goebel?
Yes.
Commissioner Anderson?
Yes.
The audit is accepted.
Great.
Thank you.
All right.
And congratulations to Superintendent Foy. It will never be your first audit with us again.
All right. Okay, circling back to item B, Parks and Rec. Commissioner Murdoch.
Thank you, and thank you for accommodating me. This is much easier to give my report now, so thank you. Most of our committee met last Wednesday, and most of our discussion revolved around the community playfields. As we heard from a number of members of the community earlier today, I wanted to talk a little bit about that and the process that we've been following and where we're going from here. And at the end of my report, I would like to address several of the comments that several members of the public made earlier in this meeting as well. But to start, we did hear from a couple of different folks who suggested that perhaps we're rushing a process or that we should slow down a process. And I think it's just worthwhile to note that while this year has been an unusual year for us and the committee did not meet several times early in the pandemic, in the June, July, August, September, and October meetings, we have talked about the community playfields and the fact that we would be seeking public input, that we would be considering a number of these possible enhancements. And we've tried to give many opportunities for the public to share their feedback in a variety of different ways. So for example, we did send out 2 different surveys to the community. The first survey, some members of the community felt that it did not give them the opportunity to express interest in doing nothing as opposed to ranking different projects. So we sent out a revised survey and had additional feedback there. We also had 2 on-site meetings in the park at the beginning of September. I think a good number of people attended both of those. I was able to go to the first one. I believe you, President Anderson, were at the second, and I believe that Commissioner Abbott was at both, along with a number of members of staff. So we heard a lot of feedback at that point. We did then have a meeting, as I mentioned, on this past Wednesday, where we provided a tremendous amount of information about possible options with respect to bathrooms, different types of locations, different types of bathrooms, different locations for a walking path, different materials for a walking path, some different fitness equipment, some different lighting options. And we put that out in the public domain several days before the meeting. And then we actually asked the staff to go ahead and make a presentation with an overview before we sought public comment, because as you heard earlier this evening, there was a tremendous amount of focus about how a concrete or an asphalt path might not be appropriate. I can't speak for other commissioners, but for me personally, I see tremendous value in a crushed granite path, for example. And our committee did discuss that at that meeting. But again, that's just an example of how people might come to a conclusion based on seeing some information in a vacuum. So we actually asked the staff to go through a fairly lengthy presentation of the information before we sought public input, and then we gave the public an opportunity to comment. And I don't have the exact number here, but we probably had 25 people who spoke. And as a part of that, there were a number of questions that were asked earlier this evening. I think Richard Pinner expressed disappointment that he doesn't feel like some of his questions have been answered. I just want everybody who's on the call now and the rest of the commissioners to know I've talked with staff, and it's our intent to begin the next Parks and Rec meeting with an opportunity to answer a lot of those questions, to continue this dialogue. And I think Rick Prohov had mentioned that sometimes it can be challenging to have a 3-minute opportunity to speak and then not necessarily feel like there's a lot of input or back and forth. But again, we have been talking about this at several meetings and at several committee meetings, several on-site meetings as well. People had an opportunity to speak at the Parks and Rec meeting this last Wednesday. People had an opportunity to speak again today. We will be revisiting this again at the next Parks and Rec meeting. And then, one of the things that I'm looking for feedback from all of the commissioners here is whether they are looking to the Parks and Rec committee to actually make recommendations at our next meeting or some sort of a different timetable. But even with any of those recommendations, anyone in the public would then have an opportunity to speak at the next park board meeting, which would be the earliest point at which we would take any action. So we really have tried to involve the public to a great deal. We've tried to be open and transparent in the process. And again, I would like to thank the staff on providing an excellent presentation, providing a tremendous amount of information so that we as commissioners and the public could digest it and consider and, quite frankly, propose additional suggestions. One of the things that came out of our meeting was that there might be value in some sort of a shelter of sorts, which may or may not be attached to a bathroom. And so, coming out of that meeting, we then asked staff to go back and take a look at what a shelter might look like, where it might be located in the park, whether it would be appropriate to have it associated with a bathroom or not. And all of those things, we're going to then put that information together and get it out in the public domain in advance of the meeting like we did last time, and then follow a similar path. So, with that, I guess I'd just like to open up comment to the rest of the commissioners. We did talk about bathrooms, and we considered 4 locations, but obviously other locations could be considered as well. We asked staff to investigate the status of the 2 small bathrooms attached to the junior high that are currently accessible only to the outside, and whether we would have access to those, because at least for me personally, that might impact where I think a bathroom might be appropriate or not be appropriate, or whether one would be necessary, et cetera. But there were 4 locations to consider, and like to hear from the group if there are any others. We talked about some locations of a walking path, and actually asked the staff to come back with some additional suggestions and modifications. But this is really the opportunity for the other 4 commissioners to ask additional questions, try to see what additional information we want staff to gather in advance of that next Parks and Rec committee meeting. And then again, I'd like some guidance about the timing of the process moving forward. So with that, I'll open it up to the rest of the group.
Anybody got any questions for Commissioner Murdoch?
I see Commissioner Abbott.
It looks like, yeah, it looks like Brian has.
Well, I don't know that I have a lot of questions. I did see, more I'm going to pass on some opinions. First off, I think we've kind of come out of, we're playing catch up on community playfields, and I do hope that with regard to the other 2 parks, we can initiate this process, much earlier. I actually applaud the Parks and Rec Committee for, it's a thankless job, and we're getting criticism, but on the other hand, I do believe you're trying to get through it, trying to throw some real solutions out there so that we have something to talk about. Now, we're not just talking about bathrooms or running tracks as a concept, but as something specific so we can sink our teeth into it. Those 3 ideas, well, the running track, the bathrooms, and the lighting, I'm just going to pass on my thoughts at this point. I think we've had, I think on the one hand, we've got people that like to see a bathroom in community playfields, and we've got people that wouldn't. I also think that there's some middle ground here, and I'm hearing some people express that if you're going to put it in a bathroom, please consider not putting it in the middle of the park. So I could get behind a less obtrusive bathroom. So that's just my vote and where I'm leaning. With regard to path, lighting, I'm sensitive to particularly the school children. I really loved hearing from Charlotte tonight. I think her name was Charlotte. And I think that she probably speaks for a lot of them. I think it has to be done in a very sensitive manner, and I think we have to turn those lights off at a reasonable hour. But I think that, again, I think that we can work out solutions that don't seriously impact the park for the neighbors, but still provide a measure of safety for those who use that path. The running track, I don't know. I'm not gonna, I too question hard surfaces there. If we're talking about cinder paths, I'm willing to sort of engage. If we're talking about lights or we're talking about hard paths, I'm gonna have a hard time with that. So that's where I'm leaning. I appreciate that we're getting down to talking about real solutions, and that's all.
Just a quick question, Brian. Is there any additional information you would like the committee or staff to gather before we make recommendations, and any comment about the timing of the process?
I would say that, the bathrooms is mostly a location thing at this point. And I think that once you establish a location, we're really down to the location. So I don't know that there's much more information that I need. The design of said bathrooms, I'm willing to defer that until we know the location. With regard to the path, I don't recall, but from your meeting, but maybe I missed it. I don't recall seeing like bollard lights, or no, we did see some bollard lights, but I want to pass on this. There were bollard lights. The picture shown had the light bulb exposed so you could see it. Now, the bollard lights that were put in down at the lakefront, where they got that hat on the top and they only shine down and you never see a bulb, that I think is a really important consideration. So having some grass and some sidewalk lit is a lot different than seeing bulbs if you're looking across the park. So I'd love to see some more options there that make it less obtrusive. With regard to the path, again, for me, I'm gonna have a tough time with lights. I'm gonna have a tough time voting for path. But if we're talking about cinder paths, without lights, then yeah, show me some details. I can get into that. I can get into that conversation. Now, I'm sure there's other people on the board who would like to see the path and maybe like to see the hard. I don't have much. I'm just telling you, I don't have much interest in it, but maybe other people want to see those details, options. I think you've made a good start. I think you can keep moving. That's all.
Go ahead.
Go ahead, Todd.
I was just going to give similar comments to Brian in that just to express where I'm coming from and where my opinion lies. I would also support bathrooms. I'm embarrassed to say that both of my daughters have helped water a tree or two during soccer games because of the lack of access of bathrooms at some point when they were young. So the bathrooms are definitely something that I would be in favor of. And I would be, when I think of lights, I think that a low-level accent light just to see the path is what comes to mind. I don't want something like a ballpark or something like this where airlines are going to land there or something like this. Just very low-level lights. And as far as the path, I'd be definitely for that. But I think the cinder path is where I'm leaning on that, and kind of encircling the park. One of the requirements that I'd love to have if we did do that is like what was said earlier. I think Caroline said this, that some sort of measurement so that runners can see how far they would run. And that is something that is very helpful. I also can see some kids using it for PE class and this type of thing. All right, you're gonna run a mile. Okay, you're gonna, and so I can see some community value there as well. And the winter time, I absolutely agree that, I don't want it on at midnight, but at 5 o'clock in the winter time, it's dark. And I know my kids are still off doing school stuff at least under normal years, maybe not COVID years, but that's not an unrealistic expectation. So I know that when I first moved here, I tried to run on the sidewalk, and my street was so dark that I actually couldn't stay on my sidewalk. So I ended up running into someone's yard, which was a kind of a pain in the butt, but my sidewalk isn't one that goes completely straight either. So that's just kind of how I would lean.
Todd, I'm glad you mentioned the distance. I forgot to mention that the path in the Parks and Rec packet, I believe staff indicated was a mile-long path, but obviously to the extent that we vary that somehow, the distances may change. I think that was an excellent idea to document the distance on the path. Absolutely.
Yeah, have different checkpoints or something.
Anybody else want to share their thoughts? If not, I'll go. I'd look at the bathrooms and the shelter as sort of tied together. And if Commissioner Murdoch asked if we had any requests of the staff, and I guess I've made the assumption in my head, and it may be incorrect, that the middle of the park would be the most convenient place for users of the park. And, you know, it just cuts the distance from wherever you are. So everybody's got sort of a relatively small distance. And that something at either end would be very inconvenient for people who are coming from the other side. And I guess, is that a good assumption that the middle is the point that would reduce the average walk time of anybody who wants to go and use the bathroom? So I guess that's a question. I'm challenging my own assumption there. I think it makes sense that middle makes more sense, but I'd like somebody to tell me if that's a bad assumption. And the other thing is, same logic applies with the shelter. You know, if there's a need to get to a shelter, you don't want people having to run from one end of the field to the other to get there. So, you know, I look at those as more than likely having to be together, just from a cost and an aesthetic standpoint, to minimize the amount of stuff. I think the design of the building is going to have to be one with a very low profile and a see-through kind of aspect to it, sort of like the beach house. So it's not a block in the middle. I think we can be creative in how to do that and minimize the amount of perceived denseness there. And regarding the path, absolutely low lighting, just enough so that people can see where in the dark. And in the dark, I mean, like, you know, maybe 6 o'clock in the morning when it's dark onwards, and, you know, till maybe 7 or so at night, or 8, you know, not very late, but just enough that people can use it at pretty typical normal hours. No intent of having it on at night, late, and, you know, anything more than that. But I like the idea of a path. I think it's one of those things where, you know, the neighbors believe that there's no need for it, but, you know, it's one of those things where if it's not there, it's not there to use. So how would you ever know? And I think having a track like that would be a huge plus for the overall community. And honestly, I think it'd be great for the neighbors too. They can walk out their back door and go for a mile run or 2 miles, and they're back at their place and they're done. You know, so that's my thinking.
Just a comment on
I'm sorry, and I think we should consider all of the things all at once in one meeting, not piecemeal them.
I agree with one exception. What I was about to say is, you mentioned a low-profile building. I agree with that as well. But from a practical standpoint, it seemed premature to consider a building design when we don't know if or where we're going to do a bathroom. So my assumption is, if we decide to move forward with a bathroom, at some point we're going to hire an architect, and then that architect will come back to the committee with suggestions at a later date. But other than that, I agree. These sort of major decisions should all be made at one meeting. I agree with that, yes.
Right, and I wanted the residents to kind of hear that, you know, we're not trying to put up a big blocky, ugly building wherever the bathrooms are.
Agreed.
Yeah.
Yeah, I want to launch from where Commissioner Anderson left, and I think it is important that we review everything at once, have a sense of how the pieces work together. You know, a master plan as a name implies fairly comprehensive planning effort, and I think there's merit in that, but I don't know that that's, when that's been requested, I don't know that that's totally necessary. Certainly there is a plan to evaluate where things go and how that works, but that's, you know, candidly a staff responsibility, and one that we as board members will provide input to and make decisions. Hiring out a master plan and, you know, going through the efforts could take a considerable amount of time and money that could be better put toward either amenities or, you know, candidly saved. So I would just note that when we are making decisions about how the park comes back together and any future amenities, that we review these at in a tight time frame so that we can look at them at once and understand how they relate to one another. And with respect to some of the other items that have been discussed, you know, I also am a runner, and so my preference is to run on softer surfaces, you know, sidewalks and roads when necessary. But, you know, I certainly recognize Ms. Kozlowski's comment about the impact on joints over time. So I think something that is more forgiving would be useful, and you know, certainly I'll leave that to the experts as far as what material that is. But I've run on all kinds of, you know, crush surfaces, including, you know, mulch and other, you know, kind of woody, you know, surfaces that are a little softer than paved. And then, you know, additionally, as a woman and as a mother, I think it's appropriate to have lighting in dark areas, especially when people are traversing the park. And those are my comments at this time. Thank you. Thank you.
I would just like to pick up on your master planning comment, if you will. I agree. Sure. And again, it makes sense to look at all these at the same time. If I were considering a master planning process of some sort, I would really start district-wide, and I would look at what activities are appropriate at different parks. So it would really be 2 or 3 steps backwards, and it would be a much larger undertaking and a much longer undertaking. And to some extent, I feel we've answered some of those questions with respect to this park. This is our community playfields. Of course, it's a neighborhood park for folks living near the park, but it's also where we have designated the primary location for our field activities. And so again, a running path, that type of activity seems to me to be appropriate as well. And, you know, I know some of you have heard this before. You know, Steve gets tired of me sort of bringing it up, but I remember when I was on the board last time around that there was a cross-country meet, I believe for the junior high, and it was on a muddy day, and the group ran right across the soccer fields. And Steve and Bill and I talked about it, I think almost every Parks and Rec meeting, that we just couldn't grow the grass again. It took well over a year to get the grass back because those fields were so intensely used. And I think at that time, there wasn't a high crest running program, but I believe both schools now do have it. And with
That's right.
this park between those two schools, I think having I think, you know, one of the other commissions had mentioned a mile long or a mile and a half long loop would be phenomenal for the running programs for those schools as well. So anyway, thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I agree, Commissioner Murdoch. And I would just add, at no point does anyone here, board members or residents alike, want to do anything that would be considered detrimental or a takeaway. I think we're all concerned about making this park as great as it can be, and likewise making the amenities less obtrusive as possible.
And I don't know if if I jump in, or what I also been thinking, I'll throw it out here, is, is we've talked about, well, a perimeter path, but is it possible to set it so that we can build a privacy screen between the path and between the backyards of the properties around the park? And is that an option to kind of create a little bit more of a distance that's not right along the property line, and that may, to provide some space between a potential running track. And I will add, despite what some comments, there has been no decision made on what the track would be composed of. And I think most people here, and myself included, probably are more, if that is going to be decided upon that it that it is a softer material, such as a crushed limestone or whatever the item is that was put forward by the staff, and it's my opinion, getting not to be a more harder surface. But that's just
if I could jump in on that, some of you may have seen a text that came through, and I didn't see the full text, but I think the gist of it was, well, if we talk about screening, I think someone on the Zoom call assumed that screening would be fencing. And in reality, if we did do some screening, it could also be landscaping of sorts. And one of the residents asked when we were going to get going on the landscaping plan, and it was an excellent point. And so I've asked staff to start pulling together information so we can begin a landscaping plan for this park, which might include, shrubbery or other types of screening if we decide to do some sort of a walking or running path. So, one of the fun parts about this project will be looking at, what kind of plantings we can do and whatnot. And so I'm hoping that when we have a better idea of what some of these amenities might be, what landscaping would be appropriate around those amenities as well. Any other comments?
The only one I would say is nobody has discussed fitness equipment, which sort of tells me something.
Yeah. I will add though, being down at Gilson a lot, I do see the fitness equipment being used down there.
I agree.
And I asked the question if it might be appropriate to have fitness equipment over at Hibbard, closer to our other fitness programs.
I do see the fitness equipment being used at Gilson. I often don't see fitness equipment being used in many other places. I'm not opposed to it, especially in COVID times. I'm more apt to go down to Gilson now and use the fitness equipment than I am to go to our own recreation center. So everybody at the rec center had a good time. I'm not there. So am I for or against fitness? I would say, again, much like the question of the bathrooms, in the right location. I could see it, near the tennis court, something like that, in an area that's already designated for recreation that has sort of been cluttered up with
But isn't that the entire playfield is designated for recreation?
Well, I'm just saying that the built environment, there's the batting cage and there's the tennis courts, and those areas would be, for me, be more appropriate to add if the board wishes to get behind fitness equipment. Like I said, I haven't heard that, but if they do, location would factor in largely into my opinion. That's all.
All right, anyone else? Great. Thank you for the feedback. And there were several specific things. I will work with staff to make sure we pull that information together in advance of the next Parks and Rec meeting. And again, the plan is to get information out to commissioners and out to the public at least a couple of days before the next meeting, and then have the staff go through it and give interested folks a chance to comment on that again as we go through the process. As of now, I'm assuming that the Parks and Rec Committee will in fact make recommendations at the next committee meeting, unless there's a compelling reason not to.
Was that a question?
It was a question. It was a question.
If you feel you're ready for it, then I'd say that I would be ready to hear it. So, but I'm gonna leave that up to the committee.
Sounds good. Thank you.
I agree with that. If you're ready for it, I think we are too.
Yeah, I agree.
Okay, a couple of other, I'm sorry, anyone else?
Go ahead.
Great. A couple of other topics. And then, as I said, I had a couple of comments concerning some of the public input we heard earlier. Well, we talked briefly about the K-Net Nature Center, the the access on the other side of the park and how well that's been received, and it's in and people are using it and it's making the park more accessible. So I thought that was a fantastic situation and many of the neighbors were very pleased. We did have a resident reach out about whether we would be interested in creating a new park south of Lake between Hunter and Ridge. There is a lot on a corner that has sat vacant for a number of years. We did ask staff to take a look at some neighborhood park metrics. We had a brief summary of how many different types of parks we have in the system, and they were going to go back and look at whether this particular part of Wilmette was seen as underserved. But I think Commissioner Wolf noted, and I certainly concurred, that this is probably not the best time for us to go out and spend money acquiring land or then building out a park. But we also did note that if anyone wanted to make a donation, we'd certainly be open to discussing that with them. And I think Director Wilson noted that we do have a park in our system that came to be because a family donated the park and the park was named after them. So for anybody out there listening, if you want to become immortal in the village of Wilmette, consider buying a lot and talking to us, and we'll see where it goes from there. The committee reports, I wanted to welcome Natalie Liang, I hope I'm pronouncing her last name correctly, who's our new ICE manager. We began some outdoor fitness programming at Malincrot in addition to the highly successful outdoor fitness programming we've had at the fitness center. And I wanted to point out that we had 809 participants in our soccer program this year, which I think is remarkable given the changes we had to institute with the program to be in compliance with the governor's rules and regulations. And by all accounts, it's been a very successful soccer program. Again, not only thinking about the differences with the programming, we also had to use different locations because the community playfields were under construction. With that, finally, I just want to go back to, I think that we all heard a common theme from several different people earlier today. I think specifically Richard, John, and Van talked about there was a perception that there's some quote unquote, and I'm putting words in people's mouths, which is not my intent, but there's free money out there that we have a tremendous incentive to spend. And I just think that's a very inaccurate characterization of the situation. And I think we as a board should speak to that and respond to that. And I think it's inaccurate in several different respects. First of all, obviously we've had a tremendous number of conversations about different potential amenities at this park, and we'll certainly move to other parks. And, you know, I haven't once heard any commissioner say or ask, well, how much money do we have and how can we make sure that we spend all of it? Nothing could be further from the truth. And in fact, you know, we're even with some of these amenities, we're talking about finding less expensive ways to do them. And, you know, we just heard the fitness equipment, for example. It sounds like there may not be much support for that, or there might not be support for this in this location, or whatever the case may be. So I don't think it's an accurate representation of what's happened to date that we are looking to spend a pool of money. But I think there's a misunderstanding of what that money represents and why it came to be. And while I agree with the speakers that we're a taxing body, like the village is a taxing body, and we're taxing the same residents. And so to some extent, we're all in this together. That's absolutely true. But on the other hand, we are granting 3 perpetual easements, and those easements have economic value. And it would be irresponsible of us not to seek compensation for that economic value. You know, I wasn't on the board when the intergovernmental agreement was done with respect to West Park, but at that time, it was, I guess it was in some ways a cleaner deal, if you will, that the village and the park district just agreed to a lump sum dollar amount. And I believe that was $1.5 million. And, you know, if the West Park easement is worth 1.5 and that's one park, I'm oversimplifying, but simple math says 3 parks times 1.5 might indicate a value of $4.5 million. And we didn't go back to the village and say, we want this. we actually went back to the village and said, well, as a part of this process, we want to look to ways to potentially enhance these parks, and we'd like to have up to X amount. And so again, I think the thing that everybody needs to remember is we have provided an economic value, and we as a separate entity from the village should be compensated for that. And the second thing, and the thing that's really being lost in all of this, and what I think it's critical that that all of the community understands, is after the plan was originally developed, I think the village engineers came back, and if I recall, they upsized the community playfields vault and they upsized the Thornwood Park vault. And in doing that, they were able to provide the same amount of protection to homeowners in our community as the most expensive option that they were originally considering. So effectively, by the Park District partnering with the village, we have been able to work together to provide the maximum benefit in terms of stormwater protection to our community at a savings to the community of in excess of $30 million, I believe. So when you look at this potentially, you know, $1.5 or $2.5 or $3 million, or maybe even a $3.5 million spend for creating this tremendous economic savings for the community as a whole in excess of $30 million, I think that's what's relevant in these conversations. And I hope that that folks who have a different perspective would hear that and think about it in those terms, because I think we have been very good partners with the village. And I think by working together in a really creative way, we, with the village, are creating tremendous savings and tremendous value for our community. I just think it's important that everybody hears that.
Thank you, Mike. Hey, I'd like to add something to that. The other thing too is we have a once in a generation or two opportunity with the fields being completely torn up and needing to be put back together to do these particular improvements that are needed every generation or two in our park. So you just can't leave them as they are for decades and decades and decades and not make any improvements to them. So that, to me, you know, we're getting a value for the money we're spending that's going to last for, you know, decades at this point. And I think that's really important.
And if there are no other comments, that's my committee report.
Thank you very much. Let's jump to the next item on the agenda, which is unfinished business. Anybody got any unfinished business to bring to the board? The rest of the board? Hearing none. Last item on the agenda before adjournment is the consideration of the Hibbard Park Stormwater Project easements.
You have those in the packet after the director's report. It was also there was a slide within Darren's presentation earlier that showed where the easements were, and then everything after that is the actual legal descriptions of the borders and perimeters of that easement.
And Steve, somebody on our side looked at that as well, right?
Correct. Our attorneys have reviewed it, as well as the engineers.
Thank you.
And Steve, can you just clarify that this is a similar kind of easement that we used at the community playfields?
Yes, and it is exactly the similar easements we're going to have to do at Thornwood.
And they were contemplated in the, at least generically in the IGA. So this is a completion of that step.
Correct.
All right. Could we get a motion to approve the permanent and temporary easements for the Hibbard Park Stormwater Project?
I'll make the motion.
Thank you. Could we get a second?
I'll second.
All right. Could we get a roll call vote?
Commissioner Abbott?
Yes.
Yes. Commissioner Murdoch?
Yes.
Commissioner Schisler?
Yes.
Commissioner Clark?
Yes.
Commissioner Wolf?
Yes.
Commissioner Goebel?
Yes.
Commissioner Anderson?
Yes.
The motion carries.
All right. Do we have a motion to adjourn?
I'll make the
So
motion.
moved. Second.
Thank you. Roll calls?
Roll calls, Steve?
Commissioner Abbott?
Yes.
Commissioner Murdoch?
Yes.
Commissioner Schisler?
Yes.
Commissioner Clark?
Yes.
Commissioner Wolf?
Yes.
Commissioner Goebel?
Yes.
Commissioner Anderson?
Yes.
You get to say it, Commissioner Anderson.
Meeting adjourned.
Another one in the
Okay.
books.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good night.